The crimson warships of the Vorthon Empire cut through the darkness of space like blood drops in water. General Zekros stood tall on the command deck of his flagship, the Crimson Talon, his four arms crossed in satisfaction. For 3 millennia, his species had conquered world after world, building an empire that stretched across thousands of star systems. No civilization had ever posed a real threat to their supremacy. The Vorthons were impressive beings, standing nearly 8 feet tall with chitinous armor-like skin that gleamed purple-black in the ship's lighting. Their multiple eyes could see, across different spectrums, and their advanced technology had crushed every species they encountered. They believed themselves to be the apex of evolution in the galaxy. General, called Sub-Commander Thylex from the scanning station, we have located another inhabited world. Third planet from the local star. The beings appear to be in early technological development. Zekros approached the holographic display showing a blue-green planet dotted with lights on its night side. The energy readings showed primitive nuclear technology and basic spaceflight capabilities. He let out a sound that resembled laughter among his kind. Another collection of primitives, he said dismissively. Begin standard subjugation protocols. This world will fall within days. Far below on Earth's surface, Captain Marcus Kane was reviewing reports at the International Space Command facility in Colorado. A former fighter pilot turned space defense coordinator, Marcus had spent years preparing for theoretical threats from space. His weathered face showed the experience of someone who had seen combat, and his steady hands never shook even under pressure. "Sir," called Communications Officer Lisa Park, "we're detecting massive objects entering our solar system. Multiple contacts moving in formation." Marcus felt his blood run cold as he studied the incoming data. The objects were enormous, far larger than anything humanity had ever built. Their movement patterns showed intelligence and purpose that left no doubt about their artificial origin. "Get me Dr. Grant immediately," Marcus ordered, his voice remaining calm despite the magnitude of what they were facing. Dr. Olivia Grant arrived within minutes, her brilliant mind already processing the implications. A theoretical physicist who had spent her career studying advanced propulsion systems, she was one of Earth's foremost experts on technologies that existed only in theory. Her dark eyes widened as she examined the sensor readings. "Marcus, these energy signatures are incredible," she whispered. "They're using some form of quantum field manipulation that we've only dreamed about. But look at these patterns here." She pointed to specific readings on the display. "Their technology follows certain physical laws. If I'm right, there might be ways to interfere with their systems." The first Vorthon message arrived 3 hours later, transmitted simultaneously to every major communication network on Earth. General Zekros's voice echoed with authority and contempt as the universal translator converted his words into hundreds of human languages. "Primitive beings of the third planet, you are now subjects of the Vorthon Empire. Your resistance is meaningless. Surrender your weapons and prepare for integration into our domain. Those who comply will be spared. Those who resist will be eliminated." The message sent shockwaves around the world. Emergency sessions convened in every capital, military forces were placed on highest alert, and billions of people looked to the sky with a mixture of fear and determination. But Marcus Kane was not the type to surrender without a fight. Within hours, he had assembled Earth's finest military minds and scientists. The room buzzed with desperate energy as humanity's best and brightest worked to find a way to defend their world against impossible odds. "We can't match their firepower directly," Marcus addressed the assembled group. "But we have something they don't expect. We're unpredictable, we're creative, and we absolutely refuse to give up." Dr. Grant had been working frantically to analyze the alien transmissions and energy patterns. Her breakthrough came when she realized that the Vorthon technology, while advanced, operated on principles that followed universal physical laws. "Their shields pulse in regular intervals," she explained excitedly, "and their weapons have a recharge cycle. If we can time our attacks precisely, we might be able to exploit these weaknesses." The first test came sooner than expected. A small Vorthon patrol descended toward Earth's atmosphere, expecting to face no resistance from the primitive inhabitants. but they were about to discover that they had severely underestimated the species they were trying to conquer. Fighter pilot Jake Morrison had volunteered for the first intercept mission. His experimental aircraft had been hastily modified with Dr. Grant's insights, carrying weapons designed to exploit the brief windows of vulnerability in Vortin's shields. As he and his squadron approached the alien vessels, his heart pounded, with a mixture of terror and determination. The battle lasted only minutes, but it changed everything. Using hit-and-run tactics and precise timing, the human fighters managed to damage 2 Vorthon ships before retreating. The aliens, who had never encountered such unexpected resistance, found themselves forced to withdraw and reassess their strategy. General Zekros stared at the battle reports in disbelief. No primitive species had ever successfully engaged Vorthon forces. These humans had used tactics and timing that suggested a level of strategic thinking he hadn't anticipated. For the first time in his long military career, he felt a flicker of uncertainty. Word of humanity's first victory spread across Earth like wildfire, igniting hope in the hearts of billions. But more importantly, the news began to ripple outward, through the galaxy, carried by traders and travelers who couldn't believe what they had witnessed. Other conquered species whispered among themselves, wondering if perhaps the mighty Vorthon Empire wasn't as invincible as they had believed. The stage was set for a conflict that would reshape the galaxy forever. The news of humanity's impossible victory spread through the galaxy like ripples in a pond. On distant worlds where the Vorthon Empire had crushed hope long ago, whispered conversations began in shadowy corners and hidden meeting places. The impossible had happened. Someone had fought back against the Vorthons and lived to tell about it. On Earth, engineer Jake Morrison worked tirelessly in the underground facilities that had been converted into weapons development centers. Unlike the fighter pilot with the same first name, this Jake was a brilliant inventor whose mind worked in ways that amazed even Dr. Grant. His workshop was filled with salvaged Vorthon technology and human ingenuity, creating hybrid weapons that shouldn't have been possible. The beauty of their technology, Jake explained to Captain Marcus Kane as he demonstrated his latest creation, is that it's so advanced they never considered someone might use primitive methods to disrupt it. This pulse rifle uses our basic electromagnetic principles to interfere with their quantum field generators. The weapon looked crude compared to sleek Vorthon designs, but when Jake fired it at a captured alien shield generator, the device flickered and failed. Marcus smiled grimly as he watched the demonstration. Humanity was learning to turn the enemy's sophistication against them. Lieutenant Nina Cross had become something of a legend among Earth's resistance fighters. A former Special Forces operative, she specialized in guerrilla warfare tactics that the Vorthons had never encountered. Her small mobile units struck at Vorthon outposts and supply lines with surgical precision, appearing and disappearing like ghosts in the night. The Vorthons, accustomed to large-scale battles between fleets, found themselves constantly confused by these hit-and-run attacks. Their massive ships couldn't effectively target small groups of humans who knew the terrain and used it to their advantage. Nina's tactics were being studied and copied by resistance cells forming across the planet. "We don't need to win big battles," Nina told her team as they prepared for another raid. "We just need to make them afraid to leave their ships. Every time they step outside, they should wonder if we're watching from the shadows." Meanwhile, on the Vorthon homeworld of Vorth Prime, General Zekros faced uncomfortable questions from the High Command. Emperor Vraxis, supreme ruler of the Vorthon Empire, had summoned him to explain how a primitive species had managed to resist their forces. "These humans are not like other species we have conquered," Zekros admitted reluctantly. "They adapt quickly and use unconventional tactics. They seem to thrive on adversity rather than being crushed by it." Emperor Vraxis, ancient even by Vorthon standards, studied the battle reports with his multiple eyes. His chitinous shell bore the scars of countless victories, but never had he seen reports like these. "You speak as if they are a threat to our empire, General. They are primitives with chemical rockets and metal projectiles. Primitives who have destroyed 7 of our ships and captured 2 others, Zekros replied carefully. "Primitives who have somehow learned to interfere with our shield technology, my lord. I recommend we commit additional forces to this world before their resistance spreads further." The Emperor's decision would prove to be a critical mistake. Instead of sending more ships, he commanded Zekros to crush the human resistance quickly with existing forces, believing that any delay would be seen as weakness by other subject species. This decision gave humanity precious time to prepare, and more importantly, it gave other oppressed species time to organize. On the mining world of Kepler 442b, the enslaved Zephyrians began sabotaging Vorthon equipment. The aquatic Nereians of Proxima Centauri b started coordinating underwater attacks on Vorthon facilities. Even the peaceful Altarians began sharing intelligence about Vorthon ship movements. Back on Earth, Dr. Grant made another breakthrough that would change everything. While studying captured Vorthon communication devices, she discovered that their empire used a quantum entanglement network for instant communication across vast distances. More importantly, she realized that this network could be accessed and potentially disrupted. If we can tap into their communications, she explained excitedly to Marcus and the assembled Earth Defense Council, we can coordinate with resistance movements on other worlds. We could turn their own communication system into a weapon against them. The first successful contact came 3 weeks later. A crackling transmission from the Zephyrian resistance reached Earth, carrying a simple message. We heard about your victory. We want to fight too. How can we help? Marcus stared at the message display, understanding that everything had changed. Humanity was no longer fighting alone for their own survival. They had become the spark that was igniting rebellion across the galaxy. Similar messages began arriving from dozens of worlds. Species that had been conquered decades or even centuries ago were suddenly finding the courage to resist. The Vorthon Empire, which had seemed invincible for 3,000 years, was facing the greatest threat in its history, not from a single powerful enemy, but from the collective will of oppressed peoples who had finally found hope. General, Zekros received these reports with growing alarm. Rebellions were breaking out simultaneously across 17 star systems. Supply lines were being disrupted, communication networks were experiencing mysterious failures, and Vorthon forces were being stretched thin trying to contain multiple uprisings. The humans have done something we never anticipated, he reported to Emperor Vraxis. They have shown the galaxy that we can be beaten. Every species we have conquered is now questioning our power. The Emperor's rage was terrible to behold, but even his fury couldn't change the reality of what was happening. The carefully constructed fear that had held the Empire together for millennia was cracking, and the cracks were spreading faster than they could be repaired. On Earth, humanity prepared for the next phase of their impossible war. They were no longer just fighting for their own world. They had become the leaders of a galactic revolution that would determine the fate of countless species across the stars. The spark had been lit, and now the galaxy was beginning to burn with the fire of freedom. Admiral Victoria Stone stood in the newly constructed command center beneath the Rocky Mountains, watching holographic displays show the positions of Allied forces across the galaxy. 3 months ago, she had been the commanding officer of Earth's small space navy. Now she found herself coordinating a rebellion that spanned dozens of star systems. Victoria was a veteran of Earth's early space conflicts, her silver hair and steady demeanor earning respect from human and alien allies alike. Her strategic mind had been shaped by years of studying historical military campaigns, but nothing had prepared her for the complexity of coordinating multiple species with different technologies, cultures, and communication methods. Admiral, called Professor David Chen from the communication station, we're receiving another batch of encrypted messages from the Rigel system. The crystalline collective there has agreed to share their shield technology with our forces. David was a linguistics expert who had become Earth's primary translator for alien communications. His ability to decode and understand different alien languages had made him invaluable in building the growing alliance. He worked with teams of xenobiologists and communication specialists to bridge the gaps between species that had never worked together before. The resistance network had grown beyond anyone's expectations. What had started as desperate messages between conquered worlds had evolved into a sophisticated communication system that spanned half the galaxy. Each species brought unique strengths to the growing alliance. The Zephyrians from Kepler 442b were master engineers who understood Vorthon technology better than any other species, having been forced to maintain it for centuries. Their leader, a being called Nexus 7, had become one of Victoria's most trusted advisors despite their complete lack of physical resemblance to humans. The aquatic Nerians brought unparalleled stealth capabilities, able to approach Vorthon facilities underwater without detection. Their bioluminescent communication methods had proven impossible for Vorthon sensors to intercept. The peaceful Altarians, despite their pacifist nature, provided crucial intelligence-gathering capabilities through their vast trading networks. "The diversity of our alliance is becoming our greatest strength," Victoria explained to the Earth Defense Council. During a strategy briefing, the Vorthons conquered each species using similar tactics because they never expected their enemies to work together. They don't understand cooperation between different species. The breakthrough that changed everything came when Dr. Grant and Professor Chen, working together, successfully cracked the Vorthon quantum communication network. Not only could they now intercept enemy messages, but they could also coordinate simultaneous attacks across multiple star systems in real time. The first coordinated strike took place across 7 worlds simultaneously. Human-led forces attacked Vorthon supply depots on Earth's moon, while Zephyrian saboteurs destroyed manufacturing facilities on their homeworld. Nerian underwater teams struck at Vorthon naval bases, while Altarian traders provided real-time intelligence updates. The psychological impact on the Vorthon Empire was devastating. For the first time in 3 millennia, they faced enemies who could coordinate across vast distances and strike multiple targets at once. Their forces, designed to crush individual rebellions, were completely unprepared for this level of organized resistance. General Zekros found himself fighting a war unlike anything in Vorthon history. His forces were spread thin across dozens of worlds, each facing different types of resistance perfectly adapted to local conditions. Every time he moved ships to suppress one rebellion, 3 more would flare up elsewhere. "My lord," he reported to Emperor Vraxis with barely concealed frustration, "we are not fighting individual species anymore. They have somehow created a unified command structure. Their attacks are coordinated with precision that suggests advanced strategic planning." Emperor Vraxis studied the tactical displays showing red warning indicators across a third of the Empire. The situation was unprecedented and deeply disturbing. The Vorthon Empire had maintained control through fear and the perception of invincibility. Now, that perception was crumbling as news of successful resistance spread faster than they could contain it. On Earth, humanity had transformed into something unrecognizable from the species the Vorthons had first encountered. Manufacturing facilities worked around the clock, producing hybrid weapons that combined human ingenuity with alien technology. Training centers taught human soldiers to fight alongside beings who breathed different atmospheres and communicated through methods ranging from telepathy to bioelectric pulses. Captain Marcus Kane now commanded a mixed-species fleet that would have been impossible to imagine a year earlier. His flagship, the Unity, was a marvel of cooperative engineering that incorporated the best technologies from 6 different civilizations. Human tactical systems worked alongside Zephyrian shield generators and Nerian stealth technology. The most remarkable development was the emergence of joint battle tactics that played to each species' strengths. Human creativity and adaptability combined with Zephyrian technical expertise, while Nerian stealth capabilities provided reconnaissance for Altarian intelligence networks. The whole truly became greater than the sum of its parts. Young Lieutenant Commander Rachel Torres had become the first human to successfully command a mixed-species unit in combat. Her squad included beings who looked nothing like each other but fought with perfect coordination. The Vorthons found these integrated units impossible to predict or counter effectively. "The key is understanding that we're not trying to make everyone fight like humans," Rachel explained to new mixed-unit commanders. "We're learning to fight like a unified force where every species contributes what they do best." The Alliance's success began attracting attention from previously neutral species. The Centaurian Trade Federation, which had maintained careful neutrality for centuries, quietly began providing intelligence about Vorthon ship movements. The isolationist Kepler Republic started sharing advanced sensor technology that could detect Vorthon stealth ships. Most significantly, Entire Vorthan client species began switching sides. The Helix Consortium, which had served as Vorthan administrators for 500 years, suddenly announced their withdrawal from Empire territory. 3 minor species that had served as Vorthan auxiliaries declared independence and requested protection from the growing alliance. Dr. Grant made another crucial discovery when she realized that the Vorthan Empire's greatest strength was also its greatest weakness. Their centralized command structure and reliance on advanced technology made them incredibly efficient when everything worked according to plan, but it also made them vulnerable to disruption in ways they had never considered. They've become dependent on their own superiority, she explained to Admiral Stone. They've forgotten how to adapt because they've never needed to. We can use that against them. As the alliance grew stronger and more coordinated, something remarkable was happening across the galaxy. Species that had been enemies for centuries were learning to work together. Ancient grudges were being set aside in favor of shared goals. The Vorthan Empire had inadvertently created the conditions for the greatest cooperative effort in galactic history. The rebellion was no longer just about defeating the Vorthans. It had become about proving that different species could coexist as equals, each contributing their unique strengths to a greater whole. Humanity had started as the spark, but now they were part of something much larger and more significant. The galaxy was preparing for the decisive confrontation that would determine whether the future belonged to tyranny or freedom. The Alliance was ready to test their strength against the full might of the Vorthan Empire. The massive Allied fleet assembled near the neutral zone of the Omega Nebula was unlike anything the galaxy had ever seen. Ships from dozens of worlds floated in formation, their different designs and technologies creating a tapestry of cooperation that would have seemed impossible just months before. At the center of this unprecedented armada, Captain Ryan Foster stood on the bridge of the new flagship Horizon, preparing to lead the largest coordinated attack in galactic history. Ryan was a veteran pilot who had survived the earliest encounters with Vorthan forces. His steady leadership and tactical brilliance had earned him command of the combined fleet, despite being human in an alliance where dozens of species served together. His calm demeanor masked the enormous pressure he felt, knowing that the outcome of this battle would determine the fate of countless worlds. "All ships report ready for jump to hyperspace," announced Communications Officer Beth Park, her voice carrying across the multi-channel system that allowed dozens of different species to coordinate in real time. The technological breakthrough that made this possible was itself a symbol of what the Alliance had achieved through cooperation. Admiral Victoria Stone observed from the Strategic Command Center, monitoring intelligence reports from across the galaxy. The plan they had developed was audacious in its scope. While the main fleet engaged the primary Vorthan defense force, coordinated strikes would hit 17 key systems simultaneously, targeting the Empire's industrial infrastructure and command networks. "Admiral," called Professor David Chen from the intelligence station, "our agents report that Specialist Emma Walsh has successfully infiltrated the Vorthan Command Center on Vorth Prime. She's in position to begin the disruption protocol." Emma Walsh was perhaps the most remarkable operative in the Alliance forces. A former cybersecurity expert, she had volunteered for the most dangerous mission imaginable, infiltrating the heart of the Vorthan Empire itself. Using advanced camouflage, technology developed by the Altarians and identity masking techniques learned from the Nerians, she had spent weeks working her way into the enemy's most secure facility. The Vorthan Command Center was a marvel of alien architecture, its crystalline walls pulsing with the energy flows that coordinated an empire spanning thousands of worlds. Emma moved through the facility disguised as a maintenance technician, her human appearance hidden beneath holographic projectors that made her appear to be a loyal Vorthan servant species. "Phase 1 complete," she whispered into her concealed communicator. "I'm at the primary quantum relay hub, beginning upload of the disruption virus now." The virus she carried was a masterpiece of cooperative development. Human programming expertise had been combined with Zephyrian understanding of Vorthan systems, crystalline collective quantum manipulation techniques, and Nerian bioalgorithmic principles. When activated, it would spread through the entire Vorthan, Communication network, creating cascading failures that would blind their command structure at the crucial moment. Meanwhile, the Allied fleet made its jump to hyperspace, emerging near the Vorthan stronghold of Sigma Draconis. The defenders were waiting for them. Nearly 300 Vorthan warships arranged in the traditional battle formations that had crushed 1,000 rebellions before. But this was not a traditional rebellion. General Zekros commanded the Vorthan defense from his flagship, the Void Crusher. He studied the approaching enemy fleet with a mixture of professional interest and growing concern. The ships approaching. His position represented technologies and tactics from species that had never worked together before. Even his extensive tactical databases had no precedent for this situation. "Begin the attack," Captain Ryan Foster ordered, and the Allied fleet surged forward in a formation that seemed chaotic to Vorthan eyes but was actually carefully choreographed. Human ships with their aggressive maneuvering capabilities drew enemy fire while Zephyrian vessels used their superior shielding to protect more vulnerable allies. Nerian stealth ships appeared and disappeared like phantoms, striking at Vorthan weak points identified by Altarian sensor specialists. The battle that followed was unlike anything in recorded galactic history. Instead of the formal fleet engagements that the Vorthans expected, they faced a constantly shifting tactical situation where their enemies seemed to anticipate their every move. The Alliance ships fought not as individual units but as a single coordinated organism, each species contributing its strengths, while others compensated for weaknesses. Dr. Grant watched the battle from the science station aboard the Horizon, monitoring the effectiveness of their hybrid technologies. The weapon systems they had developed specifically for this engagement were performing beyond expectations. Vorthan shields that had seemed impenetrable were failing under coordinated attacks that exploited multiple vulnerabilities simultaneously. "Ryan," she called to Captain Foster, "the quantum disruption charges are ready. If Emma has succeeded in her mission, we can initiate the communication cascade failure now." The moment came when Emma's virus reached critical saturation throughout the Vorthan network. Across the galaxy, Vorthan commanders suddenly found themselves cut off from their central command structure. Orders stopped flowing, tactical updates ceased, and the coordination that had made their empire possible began to collapse. "Now," Ryan ordered, and the Allied fleet launched their decisive assault. Ships that had been held in reserve suddenly appeared from hyperspace, surrounding the Vorthan forces in a maneuver that would have been impossible without perfect communication coordination. The element of surprise, combined with the Vorthan's communication breakdown, turned the tide of battle in minutes. General Zekros watched in disbelief as his carefully planned defense crumbled around him. His ships, unable to coordinate effectively, were being picked apart by enemies who seemed to know exactly where to strike. For the first time in his long military career, he was forced to consider the unthinkable: retreat. But the alliance wasn't finished. As Vorthan forces began to withdraw, simultaneous attacks erupted across 17 star systems. The intelligence network that the alliance had built allowed them to strike at precisely the moments when Vorthan defenses were weakest. Industrial worlds that had produced weapons for the Empire found their factories destroyed by saboteurs. Supply convoys disappeared into hyperspace, their crews defecting to the Alliance. Even Vorthan civilian populations began to question their government's ability to protect them. Lieutenant Commander Rachel Torres led one of the most crucial secondary missions, commanding a mixed-species task force that captured the Vorthan naval yards at Proxima Station. The facility had been considered impregnable, but her team's combination of human tactical innovation, Zephyrian technical expertise, and Nerian infiltration capabilities proved unstoppable. "We've secured the shipyard," she reported to Admiral Stone. "The Vorthans are requesting terms for surrender. They want to negotiate." Across the galaxy, similar reports were coming in. The coordinated offensive had succeeded beyond even the Alliance's most optimistic projections. The Vorthan Empire, which had seemed invincible for 3 millennia, was collapsing with stunning speed. On Vorth Prime, Emperor Vraxis received the reports of defeat with growing horror. His empire was not just losing battles, it was disintegrating. Species that had served loyally for centuries were declaring independence. His own military commanders were beginning to question orders. The careful structure of fear and control that had held everything together was crumbling. "My lord," General Zekros reported via emergency communication, "we must consider the possibility of negotiating a peace settlement. The Alliance has demonstrated capabilities we never anticipated. They fight not just as individual species but as a unified force that amplifies each member's strengths." But Emma Walsh wasn't finished with her mission. Deep in the Vorthan Command Center, she had discovered something that changed everything. Evidence of the Empire's greatest secret. The Vorthans weren't just conquerors. They were fleeing from something even more dangerous that existed in the dark spaces between galaxies. Their expansion had been driven not by greed alone but by fear. This revelation would reshape everything about how the galaxy understood the conflict and what would need to happen next. The war against the Vorthan Empire was ending, but the real challenge for the Alliance was just beginning. The surrender negotiations took place aboard the neutral station Harmony's Edge, a hastily constructed facility in the void between galaxies where representatives from dozens of species could meet safely. Admiral Victoria Stone sat across from General Zekros, both leaders understanding that the decisions made here would reshape the galaxy forever. The revelation that Emma Walsh had discovered in the Vorthan Command Center had changed everything. The documents she had recovered revealed the truth behind 3 millennia of conquest. The Vorthan Empire had been fleeing from an ancient enemy known only as the Void Swarm, entities from the space between galaxies that consumed entire civilizations. "Your species and ours have been fighting the wrong war," General Zekros said, his multiple eyes showing what humans had learned to recognize as exhaustion. "We conquered to build strength, to create an empire that could stand against what we knew was coming. But we became the very thing we sought to protect against." Dr. Grant studied the Vorthan data with Professor David Chen, their combined expertise working to understand technologies and threats beyond current comprehension. The evidence was undeniable. Sensor logs showed massive disturbances in the void. Between galaxies, growing stronger each year, something vast and hungry was approaching. "The irony is devastating," Dr. Grant explained to the assembled Alliance leaders. "The Vorthans created their empire to fight an existential threat, but in doing so, they prevented the very cooperation that would have made victory possible. They tried to prepare for war by enslaving potential allies." Captain Ryan Foster had been promoted to admiral in recognition of his decisive leadership during the final campaigns. Now he faced a challenge even greater than defeating the Vorthan Empire, uniting former enemies to face a threat that could destroy everything they had fought to protect. "We have 2 choices," he addressed the combined leadership council. "We can spend the next decade settling old scores and fighting over territory, or we can begin building something that has never existed before, a true galactic federation based on cooperation and mutual defense." The negotiations were complex beyond anything in galactic history. Species that had been enemies for centuries had to find ways to work together. The Vorthans, despite their recent defeats, possessed technologies and knowledge that would be crucial for facing the approaching threat. But many Alliance members struggled with the idea of working alongside their former oppressors. Specialist Emma Walsh, now promoted to Intelligence Director, worked tirelessly to verify and interpret the Vorthan intelligence about the Void Swarm. Her infiltration skills had evolved into something far more valuable: the ability to bridge gaps between different intelligence networks and create unified threat assessments. "The approaching entities aren't just another hostile species," she reported to the Leadership Council. "According to Vorthan historical records, they're something fundamentally different. They exist in the quantum foam between realities, and they feed on organized matter and energy. Entire star systems have simply vanished when they arrive." The breakthrough in negotiations came from an unexpected source. The peaceful Altarians, who had contributed intelligence gathering throughout the rebellion, proposed a solution that honored both justice and necessity. Former Vorthan territories would be placed under Alliance protection, but governed by councils that included representatives from previously enslaved species. The Vorthans would contribute their technology and knowledge while accepting limitations on their military power. Lieutenant Commander Rachel Torres, now promoted to commander, was chosen to lead the first integrated exploration mission to the edge of the galaxy. Her success in commanding mixed species units made her the natural choice to investigate the approaching threat firsthand. The mission would take her team closer to the void than any expedition in recorded history. The construction of the new galactic defense network required unprecedented cooperation. Human industrial capacity combined with Zephyrian engineering expertise to build monitoring stations throughout the outer rim. Nerean stealth technology provided early warning systems that could detect threats across vast distances. The Crystalline Collective contributed quantum communication networks that could coordinate responses across the entire galaxy. Professor David Chen found himself appointed as the first director of interspecies communication, tasked with developing protocols that would allow dozens of different species to work together effectively. His linguistics expertise had evolved into something far more complex, understanding how different forms of consciousness could cooperate toward common goals. The Terran Federation was officially established 6 months after the end of the Vorthon War. Unlike the Empire it replaced, the Federation was built on principles of voluntary cooperation and mutual benefit. Earth became the symbolic capital, not because humans were superior, but because they had proven that cooperation was possible even under impossible circumstances. Dr. Grant was elected as the Federation's first science director, overseeing research projects that combined knowledge from dozens of civilizations. The hybrid technologies that had won the war against the Vorthons were being refined and expanded to face threats that no single species could handle alone. "We're not just preparing for war," she explained to the Federation Council. "We're proving that different forms of life can create something greater than any individual civilization. If the Void Swarm feeds on organized matter, then our greatest weapon might be organization itself. Cooperation so complex and adaptive that it becomes impossible to destroy." General Zekros, despite his species' defeat, found himself appointed as military advisor to the Federation Defense Force. His knowledge of the approaching threat was too valuable to ignore, and his transformation from conqueror to protector symbolized the changes happening throughout the galaxy. The first contact with the Void Swarm scouts came sooner than expected. Commander Rachel Torres's exploration mission detected massive disturbances at the galaxy's edge. Reality itself seemed to be breaking down as something vast approached through dimensions that normal matter couldn't perceive. "They're not ships, or creatures in any sense we understand," she reported back to Federation Command. "They're more like holes in space that move with purpose. Our sensors can barely detect them, and when they pass near star systems, the stars themselves begin to fade." The defense preparations that followed mobilized every resource in the galaxy. The Federation fleet that assembled to face this threat made the Alliance force that had defeated the Vorthons look small by comparison. Ships from hundreds of worlds flew together in formations that represented the greatest cooperative effort in galactic history. Admiral Ryan Foster stood on the bridge of the Federation flagship Infinity, watching as the combined fleet prepared for a battle that would determine whether organized life could exist in their galaxy. Beside him stood representatives from dozens of species, including General Zekros, all united by the understanding that their survival depended on working together. "Whatever happens next," Ryan announced to the fleet, "we face it as one people. We are no longer separate species fighting for individual survival. We are the Galactic Federation, and we will defend our home together." The approaching darkness at the galaxy's edge began to pulse with malevolent energy, but it no longer faced a collection of scattered civilizations. It faced something unprecedented, an alliance of different forms of life that had learned to combine their strengths while maintaining their unique identities. Humanity had started as a single species refusing to surrender their freedom. They had become the catalyst for the greatest cooperative effort in galactic history. The war was over, but the real adventure was just beginning. The galaxy now belonged to those who understood that their differences made them stronger, not weaker. The age of empire had ended, the age of cooperation had begun, and in the vast darkness between the stars, something ancient and hungry was about to discover that some things were too strong to be consumed, too unified to be broken, and too determined to ever surrender.